everyone. It was great to see you all at Greenwood last week. And I'm busy trying to get a proposal in by this Wednesday, so I haven't had a lot of time to play with this. And it takes quite a bit of time on the computer. And so since it ties my computer up while it's trying to do the analyses, I wind up having to keep switch it on and switch it off. But I wanted to show you what it was I was talking about if you're not familiar with it. And it's a little abstract, but if you look at these blue squares here, each one of these squares represents a photo which was taken by the camera that was mounted on a little Phantom 3 drone. And as you can see, we went up and then down and then up and down and up and down. We moved it over to the right a little bit too much here, so we left a gap. And a gap is not good because if there's a gap, you can't actually stitch together pictures that don't overlap with one another. And that's the goal of this, is to stitch all of these photographs together that were taken by the drone. What you can see behind these cameras are these photos is the point cloud, which is generated by a software program. And there are many different programs that do this. I happen to be using PhotoScan by Agisoft. And if you zip in, you can see here are the different photos that were taken by Suzanne and myself with the drone after everybody had left, and Joe let us stick behind and see what we could do. One of the things that's really nice about working at Greenwood Cemetery is that the trees are isolated. It's very hard in a forest to fly a drone because of all of the branches. But in this case, we can get around the tree. One of the things I was excited about was that if one could actually photograph an entire tree, you could document the spread or the pattern of infection if there was some sort of visible sign. And if there wasn't a visible sign, maybe something like thermal infrared or NDVI might pick it up. Right now, this is just an ordinary visible spectrum camera. And as you can see as we zoom in, I'm going to move up here, there are all the different photographs. Now, the software stitches these things together, and there were actually quite a number of them. I don't know, maybe several thousand. I had only extracted about 600, and of the 600 or so, 686, almost 700 of them, really only about 546 were stitched together with any measure of success, and that's probably because there are gaps here. So what one really wants to do is fly the drone very carefully up and down, up and down. It would be nice if you could program it to do that, but it's hard to not hit branches and worry about people or a car that might go by, so it's easier or safer to do it by hand. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the cameras because they're obstructing our view. Let's turn it off here. And there's the point cloud. So the point cloud, yes, many of you probably know, are the x, y, z coordinates in three-dimensional space of the photographic images that have been stitched together. Now these have been in a sort of semicircle around this oak tree here. That's Rich, LA, busy taking some measurements. And one of the problems we have is that if there's movement, then the photographs wind up being in different positions, and it becomes hard for the software to stitch it together. And everybody will say that the most difficult thing to handle in this kind of analysis is vegetation. And on a windy day, which it happened to be somewhat windy, if the branches sway, then there's no way to really sort of stitch them together because the leaves are in different positions. The more stationary the object is, the easier it is. Of course, the stones will come out a lot better. Now, there are a lot of gaps, as you saw, but this is what the point cloud is. It's called the sparse cloud, and then I sort of cordoned off an area to look at a little bit more closely and ignore all these other points. The other problem we have, which actually can be handled, is that there's a lot of blue sky, and it can't tell the difference between what's the blue sky and what's something you're interested in. And the blue sky is flat. It's no way for it to tell which point in the sky is further than another. They're all very far away. But you can remove blue and white that might represent the cloud in the sky, which is fine for vegetation. Of course, a lot of the stone or the monuments here are white or have shades of blue, so they would disappear. And now if we go to the dense cloud, which means that we use the the sparse cloud just to get an idea if things are working out. And then you can commit the commuter to running a very much longer analysis to generate many, many points. And here we are. So what we have here is about 5 million points, which the computer has figured out the XYZ coordinates of. And this is our tree. Now, where the branches were moving, it really wasn't able to put things together, where the branches weren't moving so much like this lower tree here. It's especially windy higher up as the drone went higher up. In fact, it was hard to hold the drone still. Not bad. You see, Rich has disappeared because he was moving, so it wasn't actually able to figure out where that person in the bright clothing was. A car went by, but of course it wasn't picked up because it disappeared, or at least it wasn't in all of the different scenes. And as you zoom in, you can see it's fairly faithfully rendering the tree and all of its architecture, and here are the leaves. And what I thought would be really neat is to analyze these different leaves for their color. So those of you who've worked with LiDAR, which uses laser beams to restructure to create a structure vegetation map, does the same thing, except that LiDAR is actually a source of light that then reflects off of all of this, and it's usually one wavelength. Whereas this is a reflected light, and one of the problems is that if it's very, very dark, then there isn't very much light reflected. This was a nice sunny day. Of course, sunny days create shadows, as you see down here. So ideally, what you'd have is a bright, windless, hazy day to do this on, so the number of opportunities would be pretty rare. You might imagine that if you came back to this tree and did this several times, you could actually see over the course of time how this tree changes. And here are some of the stone monuments. So not bad for a windy day. Just to show you that this is a three-dimensional structure, I can rotate it. Here we go. Oops, we don't want to rotate that way. Let's put it this way. We can look down into the tree or onto its side. And the great thing about that is that we get less of a problem with scale, and the things that are far away or small. We can do that. Now, if we'd walked all around the tree, we would have been able to do this, but we were mostly sort of experimenting with the whole tree, the idea of doing an entire tree. And we had 3 different drones to fly, and one of them broke and so forth. But you can see it's not bad. This is the road. Here are the various monuments. You can see this monument here, and it's a little hard to see, but if we turn it around, there it is. Okay. Yep. Now, you can do something which isn't terribly useful, but artists use this a lot, especially computer graphics artists, and that is to try to create a 3-dimensional solid map of the images. This doesn't work so well with vegetation because it's way too complicated, but it gives us a sense of what things look like. And here, the 3D model only generated about 1 million faces, which is a lot, but not a lot as these kinds of things go, and certainly not a lot for a tree. But it's very, even with my computer, which has a couple of pretty good graphics cards, it takes a long, long time to do. But we'll take a look at it anyway. So let's do this. It might take a little while to generate it, so I will pause in case you notice the hesitancy there. Okay, I'm going to pause, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, after a few minutes, this is its attempt to create a sort of solid image. So this little monument here you can see is now much more solid. There are lots of places where it just simply didn't know what to do because there wasn't enough information. So you can see the tree is relatively sparsely populated by leaves, but still, if you look around, you can see that if it was a windless day, we would have done better. But also, it's still much more detailed, I think, about what goes on in the tree. And we didn't have to climb up the tree in ropes or use a cherry picker. We were able to do this by getting the drone up there. And if, as I said, if we walked around the entire tree, we would have had a lot more data. Would have taken a lot more time to analyze, too, just to show you there's that monument that's in front. And there's a couple things about this. As I said, this isn't really useful for the kinds of analyses we would want. The point cloud is really what we want because that'll give you the information about the architecture, the structure, the mass, and the different colors of the leaves, and so forth. What I've been interested in is in doing this with the thermal infrared, because then that would give you a measure of the physiology. So the drone that Miles was showing us might have some capacity to do that. It has the same problem as does LiDAR, that if it's windy, it's very hard to try to imagine using this method. Miles said, probably the best time would be before sunset, when you don't have a lot of heat being generated by bright sunlight, and perhaps it's less windy. But if you could do it in thermal, that would be interesting. Of course, the thermal infrared cameras are much lower resolution than the visible spectrum cameras. So there it is. It's kind of cool. The second thing I thought this is really interesting is for public relations. I think the public probably will find this pretty magical, or I do. At least I never get tired of it. But then we each have our different sort of ideas about what's interesting and what isn't. And you can see there some of the monuments in the background. So it's pretty fascinating to me how this actually is done. Now, one thing is we did not fly around the back, so I just want to show you what happens. If you go to the back, it has no idea what's in the back of that monument, for example. It has no idea what's in the back of the tree because we never photographed it. So we're only limited to what we can look at in terms of the semicircle we made around it. And because there were gaps, you'd have to guess, mathematically guess where some of the photographs actually would not have been stitched together. Okay, so the idea of using what's called structure from motion, or SFM, structure from motion, has been something I've been exploring for a little while. And it's an alternative to LiDAR. It can be done very readily with drones. And the interesting thing about the Greenwood is, of course, that one can walk around the tree, and many of the trees actually you can get quite a view of the whole tree, which is very difficult to do in the forest. It's hard to fly between trees which are very close together with branches in contact. On the other hand, trees don't usually grow like this, except in savannas. And trees are usually fairly narrow and are reacting to all the other trees around them. So the flip side of being able to get all around the tree and get interesting analyses is that, at least in nature, one doesn't usually see trees like that, as I said, except in savannas or in the Midwest landscape where farmers have left some trees to grow around their homes, but after they cut down the forest. But mostly it doesn't look like that. And so, so I'm excited about the possibilities here, especially about the dense cloud. It would take a lot more work. I really haven't had the time, but we want to remove the sky. We want to do a much more careful flying around this. We'd want to have access to better computers. My computer's pretty good, but really I think we need to get onto virtual machines, and Kevin has been talking with Microsoft about that possibility. Otherwise, your computer can be tied up for days trying to analyze this, which is fine if you're a CGI artist working for a company that's paying you millions of dollars to do this. But for ecologists who have no money, we need to find alternative solutions to this. And with respect to oak wilt, I thought if we found a tree in which we could follow throughout the year, or maybe through a couple of years or longer, to see the spread before it got cut. Now, the idea is you probably would cut it pretty soon, but still, it might pose some interesting opportunities that one cannot get out of a regular forest. And if the thermal infrared were able to be stitched together like this, I think that would be super cool, because we'd actually have a 3D map of the physiology of the tree, which is not easy to do, but I think that the technology is getting better. The drone that Miles showed us was probably state of the art for sort of consumer ready cameras. The military has much better equipment, but they would never let us have access to it, nor could we afford it. Still, pretty exciting. Thanks everybody for coming out. We have more images that we took, which we will try, Suzanne and I, but not until our grant proposal is submitted this month. Take care, everyone.